Well, I mean, aside from playing his instruments, and aside, of course, from hearing his music, I only met Les once, and it was like 20, 25 years ago. And I mean, he only died last year, but this is how long he's been an icon. This was like 20, 25 years ago. And like, it was some event, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was all the great guitar players of the world. You know, there was Steve Vai and Rick Derringer, and I was there. I'm not a great guitar player, but Johnny Winter and everything. It was just like a sea of guitar players just there to have a little event with Les Paul, who everyone recognizes as, you know, he didn't invent the electric guitar, but he perfected it in a way. You know, and everyone, my very first serious instrument was a Les Paul I bought in a hock shop for $85, but it was a real Les Paul guitar. And
you had the famous, was that a Les Paul SG? The one with the
no, I acquired that later. No, this was just kind of a plain, you know, the standard. It had the soap bar pickups. You know, it was a pretty old original one. This was in 1966, I think, when I got it, and it cost $85 in a hock shop on South Street. That's how ubiquitous the instruments were that I could get. Well, today would be an incredibly expensive instrument for. Well, $85 was nothing in 1966, but it still was like the first real guitar I ever had, and it was, I mean, for me, I was playing all knockoffs, Japanese guitars and stuff all through high school, and it was the first time I had my hands on a real guitar, you know, and I think it, you know, it changed the way I played, you know, whatever I thought I was as a player once I had a real instrument. You know, something that was tempered. You know, it was in tune all the way from the bottom of the neck to the top and stuff like that. It was, yeah, it was my most prized possession at that point in my life.
Was this pre-Nas, pre-Woody's?
It was pre-Nas. It was Woody's Truck Stop. It was the guitar that I bought to play in Woody's Truck Stop. I didn't even, when I joined Woody's Truck Stop, I didn't even have a guitar. I was borrowing other people's guitars. And they took me to South Street, and I think I had $100 my grandmother gave me for my graduation from high school. Hadn't figured out what to spend it on. And that was it. I bought that Les Paul guitar, and it was, yeah, the real beginning of my career as a serious guitar player. I was just a diddler before that.
And as a musician, I mean, you've been an overdubber for years, so do you feel a special kinship for Les in that respect? I mean, as the man who sort of...
Well, yeah, the whole idea of having a studio of your own so that you're never watching the clock. And when you stop watching the clock, that's when you get real, like, ideas. You know, where you're not worried about being kicked out of the studio or something like that. So the whole concept of having your own studio, it's not just the, you know, the luxury. It changes the way you make music. It gives you ideas you wouldn't have had otherwise because people are trying to chase you out for the next session. And so, yeah, it was not only that, you know, it was the fact that he more or less invented, or at least propelled the idea of multi-track recorders. He didn't invent stereo, but he did invent 3-track, because I don't know anybody else who ever had a 3-track machine. You know, but the whole idea of, you know, bouncing things back and forth, the idea of making hardware that would accommodate your musical ideas. You know, Les had the, he didn't just have the ideas, he had the, you know, the knowledge and the ingenuity, I guess you would say, you know, because he invented things that didn't exist before. So he was well-founded musically, he was well-founded technically, but also he was a very ingenious guy. And that was an inspiration to me, certainly, when I started doing, you know, like my DIY recordings and building a studio for myself. You think about the kind of music you're going to make. You don't think about all of the technical issues. And I think in the end, you know, what is his greatest legacy is, you know, people would like to say it's the guitar or it's the multi-track recording or one of these technological things. none of those things were driven by somebody who was just like a dweeb. He was making music, and he had ideas about music he wanted to make, and those drove the developments that he brought about. So it's not just like some obscure engineer coming up with circuits and things like that. It's a guy whose knowledge, this is what I identify with. I learn the things that I need to know in order to further the music that I want to make. And that's exactly what Les did. He learned when he got a new idea and the technology didn't exist to realize it, and he would learn what he needed to know in order to create the technology to do it.
Right, you were one of the first guys that did that DIY thing. You became known for having your own.
Yeah, I was kind of early on. It's not as if it was a revolutionary idea. It was the kind of
disappeared for a while between last year.
Well, it was the idea of owning your own studio. There was a high price of admission for that for most people. To buy a multi-track recorder and a console and all of the other stuff. That was more than most people were willing to invest. And so the business was pretty much controlled by studio rate cards. And the music that was made got controlled by studio rate cards because you didn't want to go over 3 hours at a time. It was also union rates as well. Everything was broken down into 3-hour chunks. And the great thing, for Les was, well, he may be in the union, but he doesn't have to bill himself for everything he does, so he can burn hours and hours and hours just trying to figure out how to realize a musical idea. And again, the same thing, like owning his own studio. Nobody's ever gonna walk in and say, okay, wrap it up now, Les. We got to get another gig in here or something like that. And yes, I know from personal experience how rewarding that is. To be able to create your own working environment and to make your own rules within that environment. And the irony is that, we've gone, kind of like full circle now. The price of admission for anybody who wants to do that nowadays is really almost nothing, way less than a motorcycle, or some other sort of self-indulgence. You can have state-of-the-art computer and I/O devices and hard drives to capture it all on, and microphones and things like that, and it's all accessible almost to anyone. The only thing that's missing for most people is the musical sensibility to make the most out of all of those things.
Do you have a studio at home?
Well, a studio in the sense that I've got a laptop with everything I need on it, and I got audio I/O devices and all that stuff. But I've stopped thinking in terms of the studio as an establishment of some kind. The studio is wherever you are now, and you do whatever you can do on the airplane, and then when you're off the airplane, then you whip the guitar out and do the guitar stuff. And then if you have to do something bigger, it doesn't have to be someplace that, mad props to John Stork, but it doesn't have to be a John Stork studio. It could be a house, a living room, any old thing at this point. And
are you recording your new stuff like that, pretty much?
Pretty much, yeah. I pretty much do it all kind of like from whatever's the most accessible and easy for me to use up until I have to add more something I can't play. I got to hire somebody to do that, of course. A sound or an interaction of musicians, I have to get the players in the studio. That never disappears. I mean, this is not like what we just did. I can't reproduce that myself. I can only do that if other people are involved. And whatever satisfactions that you get personally from music, it's never as satisfying as giving music to other people. And so there are definitely limits to like the insular being in the studio all the time, working on your own thing, and that's why I think Les just showed up here every Monday night or every, you know, he had to do it, you have to give it to people at some point. You can't just do it for yourself.
Did he influence your guitar playing at all?
Well, only kind of like secondarily. You know, I was heavily influenced by Jeff Beck, who was influenced heavily by Les Paul and other guitar players, you know, who were equally influenced. Because I didn't really take the guitar seriously until I was, well, just about to leave school, and I realized I wasn't going to go to college. I had to find a living, so I had to get serious about music, you know, and had to find a way into it. And I didn't want to be a front man or a singer. The guitar is the thing that I love to play, and so that's how I started as a musician, was on the guitar.
Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. I have to sober up and then get drunk again for another show. You know?